Hello, Mr. Jonathan Pageau, and thank you for granting this interview to our magazine, Familia Ortodoxă. We are really very honored and grateful for accepting.
It's great. It's great to meet you. I'm happy to be able to do this.
Well, so this is the first invitation in the Romanian environment, and I hope and I would like to have you here in Romania one day in Bucharest. So this is the beginning, the very beginning. But for the Romanian audience, I would like to present you. So I want to mention that Jonathan Pageau is a French-Canadian liturgical artist, writer and public speaker on symbolism, religion, and Orthodox Christianity. He is the editor of the Orthodox Art Journal, the host of the Symbolic World blog and podcast, and founder of Symbolic World Press Publishing Company. In 2022, he published the graphic novel The God's Dog, written in collaboration with his brother Matthew Pageau and the artist Cord Nielsen. The success of this book encouraged him to dive more into the storytelling by starting to rewrite and retell the classic fairy tales and to present their deep symbolism. And this will be mainly the topic of our discussion today. But before we move on to the main topic, I would invite you to tell us about how you discovered Orthodox Church. I've read that you grew up in a Catholic environment and later became familiar with the Protestantism. And after 7 years in Africa, you decided to study Orthodox theology. How did you reach this point?
So I grew up in a strange world, which is where I live is very Catholic, or was very Catholic, not anymore. But my parents converted to Protestantism. So I was born in a Baptist family. My father became a Baptist minister, and so he was a pastor. He was a Baptist pastor, and I grew up in that world. And it was really in my early 20s. Well, first starting in university, where many of the questions, let's say the deeper philosophical questions, the more mystical questions, were beginning to be in my mind. And I struggled to reconcile that with the Baptist faith that I had grown up with. Although my parents were very authentic Christians, they really loved God. But I thought that there was something missing in the theology and in the tradition. And it's in reading the Church Fathers and that I discovered what I was looking for, and how there was this whole well of beautiful language in terms of also in terms of the art and the architecture of the church and the liturgical language, as well as the deep theological language. And so I really fell in love with the ancient church. My first intuition might have been to become Catholic, because everything around me Catholicism was the most prominent thing around. But it seemed at the time that the Catholic Church was in a very difficult state, because they were constantly trying to adapt to the modern world and constantly trying to be as modern as possible. And so it was not what I was looking for. I was looking for the deep well of the ancient church, and it's really in the Orthodox Church that I found it, especially with the iconography, because I was studying art. I wanted to be a painter, but I became very disillusioned with contemporary art. It was very ironic and cynical and very removed from life, and discovering the language of the icon was one of the things that made me love art again.
Well, what happened after Africa? I'm very curious.
So I actually converted before leaving for Africa, which, by the way, is not a good idea. So if anybody wants to convert to Orthodoxy, don't do it before you leave your country. And so I converted actually the year that I was received and baptized. Is 6 months later, I was leaving for a volunteer position in Africa with my wife. So we lived in Congo for 4 years and in Kenya for 3 years. And it was difficult. I remained Orthodox. I was able to participate a little bit in the liturgical life there, but it was difficult. And so it's really when I came back in 2010 that I embraced it more fully. Even my children had not been baptized in Africa. Everything was complicated, and so my children were baptized. We started attending the parish, and then I actually started to take seriously the idea of making liturgical images, and that's when I had carved a few things before leaving for Africa, and then in Africa towards the end, I'd started carving again and making icons. But it's really when I returned that I thought that maybe I could do this for a living. Well, I didn't really know. I didn't believe it was possible here in Canada to carve icons in wood and stone for a living. But surprisingly, that's what happened. And for years, I was a professional icon carver from about 2011 about to 2016. I did it full time. And then more recently, now I do more public speaking, more writing, and so I do less carving.
Yes, I'm following you. Well, how did you discover the church fathers?
I would say it really came at first out of the lack,
Wow.
And so, for example, my brother, who was also very much interested in kind of Christian symbolism or religious symbolism, he started reading rabbinical commentaries.
Wow.
And I was reading kind of more, you could say, more mystical texts from other traditions, some Sufi text or some Sufi writers, and then even some more kind of esoteric things. And we could see that there was something there. We were still Christian, but we could see there was something there.
Yeah.
A transformational element, and we couldn't find it in the tradition that we were growing up in. And we felt, how can we be Christian, but that we see that there's something missing in Christianity, something deeper, right? A deep connection. And then it's really slowly through references, through reading different modern thinkers, contemporary thinkers, that we discovered the fathers, and then ultimately when I read a book by Vladimir Lossky called the Mystical Theology of the Eastern Church. And when I read that, I knew that I had found where I needed to go. I knew that I had found my home, because it's such a powerful description of theology that is connected to philosophy, that is connected to our experience. And so that was how it happened.
Well, I'm deeply believing that the church fathers could offer today the most profound answers to the crisis of our world. And I was last days I saw your podcast with Jordan Peterson about the dreams, the stories, the transhumanism, and you are saying that today we need theologians. They could answer all these questions and crises and so on. And I think that the church fathers have now these answers. Especially, I believe that Saint Gregory Palamas. Anyway.
Yeah. Saint Gregory Palamas for certain is someone who can help us understand the issues that we're dealing with today.
Yeah.
Saint Maximus the Confessor has been very precious to me. He's my namesake. My Orthodox name is Maximus. Saint Gregory of Nyssa, certainly. And then in terms of understanding the Bible and understanding how it connects to the world, just the hymns of the church are some of the most are very, very powerful, because they weave these different connections together. Like they create analogies that can help people understand. What we need today is we need people that are able to translate the language of the fathers and the language of the church into the contemporary world. Exactly. Because of modern theology, so many of the words that are used both in the Bible and in the theological language have been ruined. People don't understand what they mean. And so because of that, as soon as they hear those words, they stop listening. When people hear the word spirit or the word soul, when they hear the word love, when they hear, they just stop listening, because they think that it's all, or they hear angels or demons, all these things. People think that they don't have the deepest understanding of what these subjects are. And so we need theologians today that are able to translate the language of the fathers and the language of scripture in a way that the modern person can understand.
Yeah, exactly. I think that this crisis is a great chance for us and a great challenge for us, the Orthodox theologians.
Especially since COVID, it started before, but I would say especially since COVID, the churches in North America are full of converts. They are exploding. My parish has tripled in size.
In
Quadrupled,
Canada.
I think, even now. And some churches, they're bursting. They have 100 catechumen. They have more, like 50, 60, 100 catechumen. It's happening everywhere in North America. And it's mostly young people, secular people who are either, non-practicing in their Protestantism or Catholicism, or they're completely secular, haven't been baptized, don't know anything. And they're going online and they're looking for meaning. They find these people on YouTube or on podcasts, and then they come to the church, and it's absolutely astounding.
Well, it's amazing, and it's a great blessing. I think you succeeded to translate, as you said, this great treasure of the Church Fathers for the contemporary world. We in the so-called traditional Orthodox countries are not yet able to do this, and this is where, let's say, this is a little bit stagnant situation in a country like Romania or in Greece, let's say. We are lacking this dynamism of the faith, this fire, and this ability to translate the treasure we already have here.
Yeah, I understand that problem. In some ways, we have right now in America a strange advantage, the advantage of tradition being rebellious.
Yeah.
The strange, surprising moment when, getting married, having children, just wanting to be a good person, that this has become a rebellious stance. And so it's funny, who could have predicted it? But that's why we have the edge of culture. I think Orthodoxy in America is the fine point of culture. It is the tip of progress in terms of culture. And so I don't know what the solution is in traditional Orthodox countries. My feeling is that there will be some figures that will rise in Western Europe and in North America that will then be able to speak back into the traditional countries, especially the young people, and maybe help them see things that they couldn't see before. I hope that's what will happen.
Romanian young people are following you, are following Jordan Peterson, are following American speakers, Orthodox speakers. It is amazing.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, those young people then will be able to speak back into their own culture, and then they will become the ones influencing culture in the future.
Yeah. Well, this is the good news. Well, I've heard about this revival in the Orthodox American Church, let's say, but I'm so happy to hear this. Well, the second point of our discussion, before approaching the subject of the Snow White, is the ARC project. I understand that you are one of the main minds of this project, the Alliance of Responsible Citizenship, which seeks to offer today a more meaningful and constructive, conservative narrative in a world that is intoxicated, let's say, with negative narratives in different fields: politics, economics, art, science, and love. Could you share what ARC is and how you envision to tell a better story to our world?
Yeah, so I would say a good way to understand ARC is trying to recapture, in a more secular language, what is downstream from the Christian principles.
Yeah.
And So a vision, a positive vision of the human, obviously not an arrogant one, but a positive one which says the human person is made in the image of God. And what does that mean? And so what we've noticed in the past few decades is the narrative about the human has become more and more negative. And there's almost an anti-human narrative, this idea that having children is immoral, like the idea that humans are a parasite on the earth, right? The idea that to want something, good things for your children, is somehow wrong. And so we want to counter that with positive stories. And those are in different fields. One is basically the idea that it is good to have children and to be a family. This is the ideal, and that although there are exceptions, and few of us are completely perfect in our vision of either human sexuality or a family, but that is the ideal. The ideal is a man, a woman with children, and that is how societies are built. And then the idea, for example, the same with environment. We believe that the environment is very important, but that it always has to be a human first approach. And not only that, but we believe that a human first approach to the environment is the best solution to the environment, which is lifting people out of hunger, lifting desperate people that are struggling to survive. When those people are lifted out of absolute misery, then actually they actually tend to have less children. They don't stop having children, but less. And if you want to actually reduce the population of the world, the solution isn't to stop people from having children. It's to make their lives better, make them meaningful, make them beautiful. And then they will have the right amount of children. Things will balance themselves out. And so all of these things, it's mostly really to counter the kind of globalist, and also the idea that nations are evil, or the idea that we can't have our identities, we can't be part of tribes, we can't be part of nations. No, this is wrong. We all have these beautiful, Romanians have a great right, not a right, but it is wonderful for Romanians to celebrate their history, their deep traditions, and we need to be able to do that all over the world. And so all of these questions there are different versions of them, but all of them are trying to address and to counter the kind of globalist, anti-human narrative that has been pervading the elites for the past few decades.
How do you see this impact of ARC in the future?
I mean, what we hope is to create one of the things we saw is that many people felt alone, and the globalist narrative was taking over the media space, was taking over the educational space, and just the social narratives. And many people felt like they couldn't speak up. They couldn't say the things that they thought were true and that they thought were normal. And so one of the things we're hoping ARC to be able to do is to provide an umbrella, to provide a kind of cover and a sense for people that know they're not alone, that there are many people who think the way they do.
Of course,
And so providing voices so that now in your own countries, in your own networks, you can say, oh, here are some people that stand out, that are willing to speak up and say what is true. And so now I feel more safe, and I don't feel like I'm in danger for saying what I believe. And so that's one of the things. And then there's also, of course, to create networks of people who can recognize each other as having the same values and are willing to collaborate, to tell the story, but also on all other fronts, to be able to collaborate together to in some ways create a different network from the elite network that we see running the show right now.
So you want to create another kind of elite in a beneficial elite to the world, let's say, or it's something like a think tank?
Yeah, it is. I mean, part of it is definitely a think tank. The idea is to just encourage the people who already tend to think that way to at least be able to see each other, and to be able to see each other as allies in a struggle. And then downstream from that, like I said, to provide cover for people in their networks. We have to be careful, of course, not to create another globalist elite, which is not what
the conservative
we want at
elite.
all. We want to mostly just create like I said, to create cover and to create a place for people to feel like they're not alone in their vision.
Well, this is great and this is very necessary because, here in Romania, we are also trying, the Christians and conservatives are trying to support each other, to be together, because otherwise it's not possible. It's not possible to resist the pressures, the political pressures. I think that you are aware about what happened recently in Romania, the political field. But anyway, we need this collaboration between us, because otherwise it's very difficult to confront all these challenges we have every day in our lives in different fields of activities and the spiritual field, because there are challenges also inside the church from the globalists and so on. It's not easy, especially in the traditional countries. I don't know if I'll...
Well, one of the things that for sure I think ARC is trying to do, but not just ARC, but even my own work, is to try to give people the capacity to see what's happening and to discern. Because one of the things that globalism does is that it masks what it's doing in Christian narrative, sometimes Christian rhetoric. And so it uses the language of compassion in order to in order to seduce Christians into believing that this is the right path and this is the Christian path. And so we have to be able to recognize the difference between true compassion and weaponized compassion. And it's not that difficult, by the way, to do that, because weaponized compassion is a type of compassion that people use to gain power for themselves. And so people will try to point out your power and to point out that you should give up your power, that you should give up your position, that you should give up your attachments to family, to nation, to the different things. And you notice when they're saying that they are trying to gather power for their own faction. And then you know that it's weaponized compassion. And I think we need to develop the sensitivity to recognize it and to resist that type of thing, and to be able to express true compassion and reason, compassion that is in light of what Christ is teaching.
Yeah. Well, I think that in this moment, also the experience that we had in our former communist countries, it could be very useful, because these strategies are, for us at least, well known, not in this form, but this developed form of manipulation, but we could...
communism is exactly weaponized compassion. It is precisely what it's only that in the past, in communism, it's expressed strictly in economic terms. But now what's happened is those ideas have been opened up into the cultural sphere through the, after the World War II. Many of the writers, the communist writers, realized that you had to expand communist ideas into the cultural sphere. So Gramsci and all of these writers. And so we have to be able to realize that it's the same ideas. It's the same ideas. It's just that it's not just about class anymore. It's all identities that are being weaponized in this way.
And therefore we need now the good stories, the good narratives. It's a critical moment. Thank you very much. And now I want to make the transition to the main topic. As I told you, I read yesterday evening and I saw the video audio book. It is so beautiful, so amazing, so enchanting. So I decided to change the topic and to discuss about Snow White, especially today, a day before the Valentine's Day, a celebration of love that in its modern form seems to align more closely with the ancient Roman festival of Lupercalia than with the Christian understanding of love and marriage. Observed from February 13, 15, Lupercalia honored the pagan gods of love, bearing little resemblance to the sacred nature of love as seen through the Christian lens. In this cultural context, where love has become increasingly fluid. I'd like to invite you to share your thoughts on why you embarked on this project of reimagining classic love fairy tales as this one, Snow White.
The idea of re-examining fairy tales for me today has to do with this moment, particular cultural moment in which we're living, which is that we have been facing for the past few decades, maybe since the 60s or maybe since after World War II, we've been facing a type of cynicism about our traditions, a kind of subversion of the stories, a deconstruction. So in the North America, almost all the versions of fairy tales that have been expressed in the past few decades have been cynical. They're postmodern, they're inversions, they twist them, they make them into ideological tools for kind of globalist agendas and different ideological agendas. And in the past few years, it's become so bad that, for example, Disney is almost coming close to collapse. Like all their projects are failing, all their movies are very few of them are successful.
It's a good thing.
And I knew around many years ago, I found out that they were going to make a live action version of Snow White.
Yeah.
And I knew they couldn't. I knew that if they tried, they would fail miserably because they have now been so captured ideologically that they couldn't tell the story. And that's one of the things that gave me the idea and the realization that it seems like now is the time to retell these stories in a beautiful, celebratory manner.
Wow.
With a right type of reverence towards the story, with a right type of attention to detail and to and to a celebratory aesthetic as well. And that's what I wanted to do. Of course, the story is retold in a way that is trying to be relevant to today. It's not just a retelling, but it's not done where we twist the story into making it into an ideological program, but rather where different images are brought out in order to connect with a reader today. But mostly it's about celebrating and making and helping people see how these stories, they are the background of our thinking. They are the rock on which our civilizations hold. The gospel stories, the fairy tales, the folk stories, these are the things that hold us together.
Wow, yeah. It is so amazing and so relevant for our time. And especially this difference you articulate between the authentic beauty and the weaponized beauty that is presented in both in the fairy tale and in the book about the symbolism of Snow White. So we live today in a culture that weaponizes the beauty. The beauty has become an industry, and from the childhood, the girls learn to use their beauty and not to appreciate the value of the innocence and the beauty of the innocence. In this context, how do you define beauty, and what does it truly means to possess the knowledge of beauty?
Yeah, well, for sure, in the story of Snow White, one of the things you realize is it is a story about transition. It is a story about how a girl properly becomes a woman, and the dangers and the threats that come down that direction, and also the temptations, like you said, to use your beauty and to use that transformation towards other means besides what they're meant to be. And really, the solution is in the fairy tale. The solution is that beauty, a woman's beauty, for example, is a wonderful thing. It is a truly wonderful thing that the world, gives us, but that it does have a purpose, and that purpose is the joining in love, with a man and the founding of a family. And that's wonderful. That's amazing. It is not something that is not utilitarian. That is actually the greatest celebration of beauty is the marriage. and helping people see that again, right? Helping people see how that is the most precious, most beautiful direction that beauty can be aimed at, and that we shouldn't shy away from it. We shouldn't, how can I say this? That we should celebrate beauty, but celebrate it in the right context.
Yeah, well, I remember now as you are talking about a beautiful text, a commentary to the Song of the Songs by Saint Nilus of Ancyra. He has a wonderful introduction to the commentary of the Song of the Songs, and he presents the role of a beautiful woman in guiding the others to the virtue. He says that this is the reason of the beauty, to captivate, to attract, and then to guide to the good purposes of the life, to guide to the virtue, and in this, the most usual situation, to the marriage. I really like this approach of Saint Nilus, and I think that the beauty could enchant and then attract to the most to the highest purposes of the life.
Yeah, this is a secret. Like, this is a secret about beauty that that I think young girls sometimes struggle to understand, but that they actually do need to understand. Is that beauty is a power. It is a very, very powerful thing. The attraction that it produces, let's say on young men, is a very, very powerful thing. But it is exactly like you said, the beauty properly directed produces chastity. And that's the thing that people don't realize, that a young woman has the power to induce direction and chastity in a young man, because she can say something like, well, if you find me beautiful, then this is what I expect of you. This is the type of behavior that I expect of you. And this is how it was always in the ancient world. This is how that's how it was. But now we have this cheapening, where we see beauty as a way to trade to get something else, right? And not to produce virtue, but rather in order to produce a kind of exchange of wealth, or an exchange of status, or an exchange of just
power.
Of pleasure. Yeah, of power, exactly.
Also political power.
Yeah. But we cannot deny how powerful it is, and how, and how wonderful it is. It's not something that we should shy away from. It's something that we should understand how powerful it is, and what it can bring about, which is literally the continuation of the human species, which is not bad. That's not bad as a goal.
I like very much that in your book about the symbolism, you say that at the end of the story, Snow White understands the reason of the beauty, which is love. I like very much this point, and indeed, virtue, love is beauty, or expresses in this form of the beauty, although it's not always the aesthetical beauty we are expecting. So now I'd like to ask you some things about the more concrete, about the symbolism in Snow White. I like very much what you say about the mirror. What is the mirror in Snow White fairy tale?
Well, so the mirror is the knowledge of beauty, really. It is the danger of being attentive to that, right? Of being aware of one's beauty, and then becoming a slave to that knowledge.
Yeah.
And so the queen, you could say that the mirror is judging her, because she looks at herself. She's constantly looking at herself, and then she is being judged by that desire to evaluate her own beauty. Whereas Snow White is beautiful, but doesn't really know that she's beautiful. And so her beauty is pure, and it's not something that is manicured and something that is tried to be controlled, either to control others, but also what happens with the queen is that it ultimately controls her. And not only that, but it actually destroys her. So she's willing ultimately to sacrifice her beauty for beauty. She's willing to destroy herself in order to become beautiful. And we see that now, today. It's become a caricature when we see women with Botox faces and that have massive amounts of plastic surgery. We're noted, and they're so captured by beauty and so controlled by beauty,
obsessed by beauty.
They don't see that they're making themselves monsters.
Yeah,
in order to stay beautiful.
They don't have anymore the sense of the beauty, the criteria of the beauty.
And one of the aspects that I want to show is the idea of a beautiful old woman.
Yeah.
And how a beautiful old woman is not the same kind of beauty as a 19-year-old girl. But that it is something it can be very powerful. It can be very powerful because it is, when you meet an old person who is at peace with their situation, who has kind of accepted their place in the world, they shine. They have a kind of glow that is very different from the kind of prosthetic beauty of surgical, and the dyed hair, and then also the layers of makeup that sometimes people, as they age, they kind of add to themselves. But I think that's important to see that, to understand that one of the beautiful things of the older person is their capacity to be guides for the young and to help them see wisdom as these young people are discovering their own power, is to be able to guide that towards the right aim.
Yeah, I must confess now that for me, the most beautiful woman in my life was my grandmother. She was so wise, so beautiful, so kind, and she was, for me, the ideal of the beauty. And also having the occasion to meet some great spiritual fathers here in Bucharest. One of them was my spiritual father. They were they passed all this period of the communist persecutions. They were, for me, really the most beautiful persons. I preferred the faces at their old age than their faces when they were younger. They were more expressive, full of expression and full of inner beauty. And yeah, you are right about this kind of beauty.
Yeah, when we read the description of the saints, in their life, and I've also had the chance to encounter some older monks that it's hard to describe unless you've experienced it, because they're old. Like, they're old. Their characteristics are exactly what you expect of an old person. Their skin is, they have wrinkles, and their body is passing away, but there's a glow in their eyes and in their stature that is really, you can experience it. You can actually see it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to describe, but you can see it. It's wonderful.
Yeah, really. It's the beauty of God, this. Well, now returning to the symbolism of Snow White, what is the poison apple in your story?
So this is something that I've struggled to understand for a long time, because I could see in the story that it's related to Adam and Eve. It's clear, right? She eats an apple, she dies. But I couldn't totally understood it. And it's really when I understood this idea of the knowledge of beauty.
Yeah.
Is when I understood what the apple is about. Because in the story, in the traditional Grimm story, and not in the Disney version, but in the Grimm story, the queen goes to see Snow White 3 times. And when she goes, she brings different objects. She brings a beautiful comb. She brings a beautiful corset. And you think, when you realize it, it's very odd, because the mirror told the queen that Snow White is the most beautiful of all. So why is she bringing her things to make her more beautiful. Why is the queen bringing her things to make her more beautiful? And you realize that what the queen is trying to do is to make Snow White like her. She's trying to make Snow White into the queen. She's trying to make her desire beauty, make her want to weaponize beauty, make her aware of beauty and aware of her own beauty in a way that she feels she has to basically work at her beauty. She has to transform herself in order to be more beautiful. And that is what leads her to die. And so the poison apple becomes an image of that knowledge. It really is an image of the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil. But in this case, it is a fruit of the knowledge of beautiful and ugly, something like that.
Well, I like also that you mentioned the episode of the Iliad in Homer writing.
Yeah, so I did in the fairy tale. I say that this apple once started a great war, and I also make the apple a golden apple, so that it's related to the judgment of Paris that we call it, which is that Paris was asked to decide which of the goddesses were the most beautiful, and then he was to award them with an apple from the garden of Hesperides. And so, I wanted to help people see that there's a connection between these stories, between Troy, between Adam and Eve, and between Snow White. Of course, it's very subtle in the book. The book is for children. So we just say that this apple started a great war, but those who know will know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, this is wonderful that you wrote this text for children, but contains all these analogies to the mythology, to the scripture, and it's wonderful, really. I'd like to
maybe I can say one of the things you said about the Song of Songs. You mentioned the Song of Songs, and the Song of Songs were very much an inspiration for my retelling.
Wow.
And so I have a scene where Snow White actually quotes the Song of Songs when and it has to do with what I said about how beauty can bring virtue. Yeah. Because the prince, she meets the prince earlier in the story, and the prince tries to kiss her, and she says basically, like, if you love me, you'll actually wait. And the prince agrees, and the prince kind of backs off. And so it's a way to help people understand the power of beauty.
Well, the power of beauty and also the right timing. I really like these two moments. And that you said that if he would steal the Snow White in that moment, the prince would be only a thief and would not let the love become, let the love grow until the right moment. I really like this, that both the prince and the princess had to become ready for this love and for this status as king and queen.
Yeah, that's right. And that's why I also used it as a way to help people understand why the prince kisses her at the end, because that's a mystery in the story. And people have pointed out to how awkward it is, a prince going through a forest, finds a dead girl and then kisses her, And so I wanted to narratively help people understand what that means by having Snow White basically say, because the text from the Song of Songs is, do not awaken love before it's time. And so this idea of understanding the notion of the prince, after Snow White has fallen asleep or died, of how she recognized that now is the right time to engage with her. And it has many layers. It's not only about, it's about, you could say, the right time, both in terms of two people getting to know each other, and then being married. Yeah. It's a right time in terms of two young people that are too young really to be in a relationship and need to wait until they're ready. But it's also in a relationship between a man and a woman, there's also the right time. And this has to do even with children and with family. And so all of this is embedded in this idea of awakening after sleep.
Unfortunately, our culture don't teach the young people to have this patience, to wait to grow until they are ready for the great love. And they have many loves and many deaths in the meantime, until if they have the chance to have a great love one day.
Yeah, and it's I think that that's also one of the things that I wanted to help see, is that there's if like the queen, what happens with the queen is that in some way she's weaponizing beauty, and she's using beauty to get what she wants, but that ultimately destroys her. And so that's also the issue with love today, is that people aren't careful. It will devour you. Like if you use beauty just as a tool to get pleasure or to get what you want, those iterations in your life will ruin you. So the more you, let's say, the more you give in to that as a young person, the less chance you have of finding the great love, because it's like something that is getting broken slowly as you move forward. And so it becomes more difficult. And you see that, you find, sadly, you have people who wait. They say, well, I want to wait to find the person and get married. And they wait until they're in their 30s. And then it's very difficult for them. And then they can't have children, and there's all this stuff. And, they struggle to reconcile everything, and they bring all their baggage into the relationship, and they have to deal with all the stories, both of your stories. And so there are reasons why the old world was the way it was. There are reasons why we had this vision that ultimately the meeting of two virgins is the ideal. Of course, we understand that we're broken, and no one is perfect, but to maintain that as the ideal, I think is still something we can do. And then, of course, be forgiving and be understanding. But the ideal needs to remain.
Well, I would like to ask you now something, because I'm also a teacher in a private school, and I'm teaching to teenagers. They are attracted to love experience very earlier than in our time. So it's not easy, it's not possible to teach them, to give them a moral teaching. They are not attracted by such a discourse. How do you see this? We as Christians attract these young people to a pure and real love in this context, when they have love experiences very early, and we are a Christian school.
We're in a difficult time.
Yeah.
And I think that there are things that are true about the world, and there are things that are false. And the way that we understand relationships and sexuality in the modern age is false. And it doesn't yield. It doesn't yield fruit. It yields conflict. It yields suffering, and it yields divorce. It yields broken families. It yields all of these things. So one of the things that we can do as parents is to exemplify in our families the beauty of a family and the beauty of the relationship. That's our job, more than how we teach the kids.
Yeah.
We need to work on our own couples. We need to work on our own family, because everybody can see when a family is strong and beautiful, and everybody is attracted to that. And so I don't want to. I know it might be disappointing because it's not a quick fix. It's like there's nothing you can tell, but the thing you can do is to learn to love your spouse.
Yeah.
That's the thing you can do, because everybody will see how that is much better than all the crap that is put forward in popular culture. And the children, the teenagers, even the ones that maybe go a little astray because they're experimenting or they want to have their experiences or whatever. And it's sad that happens. But, I've seen it happen where young people at some point, they realize that they don't want, like, they actually don't want broken relationships, that they admire and they want something that is closer to their family. I've seen my kids, for example, at some point start to they start to have friends that are a little, it's like, I'm not sure about those friends and everything. And then they quickly realize that let's say the family life that they had as children was very precious, and that it was very powerful, and that they ultimately that's what they want.
Yeah. Last year I was teaching them. I had a course about the Chronicles of Narnia, and it was very interesting. A very good support to teach them some things about friendship, love, and so on. And therefore, I really believe that the good classic fairy tales could be a good tool for this purpose.
But then the fairy tales are really, that's why the fairy tales are great, is that they're for really young children. And it's like we've literally had decades now, a few decades of people being cynical about the idea that you have to find your prince or you have to find your princess.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, let's stop being cynical about that. That is really how it works. That you really, and of course there's an aspect of it that has to be brought back to reality as the young person becomes an adult. They have to be able to mitigate that image into the world. You can't have people living in fantasies, but the image of a child of saying there is someone that I will be joined to, that will be my fulfillment, to some extent, that is totally fine. We have to stop being cynical about it, and that's why these stories like Snow White, like Cinderella, all of these stories they really are stories that are not the children love them because they're closer to what they really desire and what they see as being true.
They have the nostalgia of the paradise inside them.
That's right.
So, do you believe that one could meet the right prince?
The thing is that, okay, this is important to understand, right? So you have to, with your children, I think you have to be able to mitigate two things. One is that's a yes and a no, right? One is that there is something powerfully real and true in the love and the relationship that you can form in your life. And that's something that the child has to desire from very young age. It's very important. But it's also important to be able to learn as you grow up that will also never fully satisfy you, right? That's why we're Christians. That's why we're not pagans. That's why we're not, that's why ultimately we have to know that can only be found in God. It cannot be found in your spouse. But the thing is that if you engage properly and you love God properly, then that is actually your best bet at finding joy in your relationships. It's your best bet in finding joy in your spouse, in your kids. And in my life, I've seen it. It's like the moments where I actually give up a little bit of my expectations of my relationship is when I have the best moments, And so those two things have to remain in tension, when you are kind of dealing with children. An ideal is fine. You need an ideal, but you also need to realize that ideal is an image of something else. That's why in the Song of Songs, if you read the Fathers, they'll say that although it is an image of a man and a woman, it's ultimately an image of the soul with God. That's what the Song of Songs is actually talking about.
Yeah, I'm working upon a thesis about the patristic interpretations of a Song of the Songs, and yeah, really, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, this image of the bride and the groom as Christ, church, and soul, or the individual soul. So I have two questions. Do you believe that by creating good movies with good stories, we could change the mind, the perspective of the young people about the love and the marriage and the family?
Yeah, I think that, not just movies, but I think that one of the things that's happened here in North America, I don't know in Romania, but one of the things that happened is that we kind of left the feel of storytelling, and the Christians and the more conservative people, they abandoned it and they left it to their enemy.
Yeah.
They got involved in economics and politics, and they forgot storytelling. And then there's a surprise, which is that your kids don't care about politics and economics. They like stories. And so if you don't tell stories, then you might think you're winning, but you're losing the next generation. And so we have to be able to tell beautiful stories again, you know. And there are many examples that we can see that not that long ago. If you think of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for example, that had a massive effect on culture. It became an underlying imagery, underlying structure for an entire generation of young people. And that happens to be the right story. It happens to be a powerful story that is both true but also subtle. It's not simplistic. It's not naive. And so I think that is something that we can do. And I think that today, right now, is actually the time to do it because Hollywood and they're falling apart. They can't tell stories anymore because they become so captured by their ideology, so captured by their idiosyncratic desires that people don't relate to them anymore. The stories they tell are not relatable. And so we have a window right now to be able to come in and to recapture and to retell the powerful stories. And one of the ways to do it is also to not be ideological ourselves and to not be simplistic and moralistic. And because fairy tales are not moral stories, they just aren't. People think that fairy tales are there to teach morals to children. No, they're far more deep and subtle than that. They give an entire world for a child to live in. They give an entire network of images that a child can identify with. And that is far better than a don't touch the hot stove story.
Yeah, they are so beautiful, and by this beauty, they are attracting the souls, I think. I absolutely agree about this window that we have now. I would like to say you that the past year we had in Romania a festival of Christian movie, documentary, and artistic fiction movies. We had guests from all over the world, from America, from Canada, from Russia, not from Russia, it was not possible, from the countries of the former Soviet Union, from the Orthodox countries. It was a very good experience. It was the first edition, and we hope that Quo Vadis festival will have a good impact in this field. It was really, and also we have of course Romanian Christian directors. It was a possibility to open to this direction, I think.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I need to go because it's really something that I care deeply about.
Could come this year in November, and then come to our festival, the Thinking Festival, which is organized by an association I'm leading together with one of my friends. It's the association Noetic Arc. We choose this title before learning something about your arc.
Oh yeah. Well, it's the vibe, huh? Everybody knows that it's time to build an ark right now. Everybody kind of understands that it's like we can see the signs, the water's coming, so we have to be able to build something to hold us.
Yeah, it's noetic from nous, but also it's related to the Noach. So it's a wonderful idea. My friend is a film director, and we also intend to work on this direction. The final question. What relevance does Snow White's transformation fairy tale hold today? She became from a young princess, a young wise woman, and a true queen. So which is the relevance of this fairy tale, this transformation story for...
So it is, I mean, Snow White is a coming of age story. It is a story of how a young girl becomes a woman, and everything about the story is there to help you see that that's what's happening. You know, you can think of a young girl who all of a sudden is transformed, and she doesn't understand what that means yet, right? She doesn't know what it entails, and so it brings all these problems at the beginning, competition with other girls, all these young boys, especially a teenage girl, like all these boys that are kind of shorter and not interesting, and they're not particularly attractive, and she's like, so what is this for then? Like what is this transformation for?
Yeah.
And so the story of Snow White is about that, but ultimately it's important to understand that the transformation of Snow White is really the story of all transformations. It's the story of how, when something changes, what do we go through? How do we move from one state of our life to the next one? How do we learn something new? How do we move into new spaces and be able to readapt, when we are in transformation? So you could think of the story of Snow White as someone who loses their house and then has to move and to find a new house. You could think of the story of Snow White as someone who changes jobs, or someone who, anything that is where you have to give up a world and that you fall into chaos, and then you have to make sense of that chaos and find the meaning for a direction that you need to go into, and then ultimately ending with a type of balance. Becoming the queen, or becoming a king, or becoming a prince, is in some ways is the regaining control of the world, is to enter into a position where now you're no longer a slave of the woods. You're no longer living with a bunch of old men that are making you work. Like, you're ultimately now in a place where you have regained control over the situation.
Yeah, it's great, really. In fact, the most fairy tales are telling the story of becoming a king or a queen, and I also like the Tolkien this program of how to become an emperor, how to become a king. In fact, the story of conquering the kingdom of God somehow, in a way, at the highest level, let's say.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think that's what God is calling us. If you see the story at the end of the book of Revelation, when you see the heavenly Jerusalem, you see the kings of the nations that come and offer their crown, to the Son of Man, to the Lamb. And I think that's actually an image of what we all are called to do, is that if we offer our glory to God, then we're in the right position in our kingship. We are kings that are submitted to a higher good. And so that's what we are all. I mean, parents are kings and queens for all intents and purposes in their family. They just have a small kingdom, but everybody has a kingdom. Everybody has an amount of things that they have dominion over, that God has given them, whether it's just their bedroom, or whether it is the family, or where it is employees, or whatever it is. And so we have to become good stewards and good kings of whatever kingdom God has given us.
Yeah, this is true. For today, I thank you so much. I'm sorry I was a little bit nervous. Great pleasure for me to meet you in this interview.
Yeah, it was wonderful. I hope it'll be useful for people. And yeah, and send me your books. I'll definitely look at them.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. This was the interview with Jonathan Pageau, an important public speaker and liturgical artist. We had the pleasure and honor to speak with him about the love in the postmodern society and culture, and about the treasure of the classic love fairy tales. See you next time.